That was dramatic.
Well, it was dramatic, yeah. So, hello, everybody, and thank you very much to Barnes& Noble for hosting us. Thank you to everybody for joining us. And it is totally my pleasure to be in conversation this afternoon with one of my good friends, absolutely one of the nicest guys in the business, and absolutely one of our best storytellers, Harlan Coben. How are you?
Good, Lee. For those who don't know, it's Lee Child, the creator of Reacher and millions of other best-selling books all around the world, 47 million selling per second, I think, at this rate. Hanging in, I love the background there. I wish I could say, Lee, your background was fake, but it's not, is it?
Well, it's, yeah, you know, nothing about me is fake. But we're here to talk about your new book, The Match, and congratulations on that. It's really good. I even read it. It is. I really loved it. All the trademark Harlan Coben stuff that I want to talk about. It brings back Wild, who is the boy from the woods, and finally, after a couple of years of wondering how the hell did he get in the woods, maybe this time we're going to find out. And all the trademark things, cliffhangers at the end of every chapter. Nobody does that better than you. But also, the thing I love about your books is that they are always current day. They're up to date. They are dealing with really contemporary stuff. And this one, I don't think it's a spoiler to say, a lot of reality TV stuff in it, and Instagram and fan comments and stuff like that. But yet, there's always a sort of yearning for a gentler kind of culture in there. And the narrator voice is always a little skeptical of all this modern stuff. So can you explain that? You know, what is that dichotomy?
Yeah, first of all, I think you're right. I mean, that's a pretty interesting observation about the kindness, but I'm not like a big researcher. In fact, I do virtually no research other than observing what's going on in society. So, you know, they'll often say, oh, that's kind of cutting edge, but it's really not. It's just what I'm seeing. But I'll do anything. I have 4 kids, and I'll do anything to spend time with them, including watching The Bachelor and other reality TV shows. So I might as well get something out of it. And I was realizing while watching it, just, you know, this isn't to knock those who watch it. I just said my kids do. But they're so manipulative and obvious. And you take these unknowns and you turn them into superstars, and that leads to Instagram influencers and that entire world, which I don't think is a good world. And I said, how can I kind of put them in this book really about a guy it's called The Match because Wild has a DNA match. So how do I do all that? And so I want to do that. I want to do what I also notice happens to these Bachelor kind of contestants. They get trolled and bullied online. How do I get that in the story? How do I get this sort of modern world in a story about a kid who 35 years ago was found wandering alone in the woods when he was 5 years old and no one knows who it is? Can anybody hear that train? Sorry about that. If there's a train sounding. So in my case, I think of 4 or 5 things I kind of want to put in a book. And I think I'll end up doing 1 or 2 of them, and I end up putting them all in. I mean, I want to do the Ancestry DNA websites. I wanted to do all this online stuff. I wanted to finally get Wild's origin story in there, and somehow it all comes together in one book.
Did you ever do for yourself the DNA thing?
I did, just for research. And now when I find anything surprising, it's really, as the rest of me, is ridiculously boring. I just figured with my height and eye color and stuff like that, I would have some strange things in my background, but nope, 99.7% Ashkenazi Jew, and so nothing surprising whatsoever, which was disappointing, I guess, in a way, but it was expected. And I don't trust those. My wife wouldn't let my kids do it, but I did it just because I wanted to see exactly how it sort of worked. I don't do, like I said, a lot of research, but that one I did do.
Yeah, I've never done it. I tried Ancestry.com, but hopeless. I had a dog with a longer pedigree than I've got.
Yeah, well, my kids want to do the dogs next. I'm like, really, what is the point? Like, if we find out the dog is something else surprising, how does that change the dog's not going to go, it's wet? I have some poodle in my blood? It's like they're not really going to care.
Yeah, really. Also, you got Shakespeare in there, which I love. My favorite play, The Tempest, you refer to it. And again, I took that as a slight counterbalance to this crazy modern culture.
Yeah, well, you're a bit of a New Yorker yourself, and a lot of the book takes place in Central Park, where I love to go walking. And every time you walk past that big amphitheater that does the Shakespeare in the park, even if you don't go to it, it just feels like something you want to preserve, a world you want to preserve. So, I think this is true of your books too, but yeah, we do the action, we do the stirring the pulse and stirring the mind. But if you're not also kind of stirring the heart, if you're not also doing something that feels a bit nostalgic, we don't stop. You don't stop the story to do these things. They have to be part of the story. I think that's kind of what it gives a story a bit of a richness.
I agree. It gives it a richness and a resonance and a kind of root somewhere. And I honestly, my theory is that readers appreciate that. They don't necessarily want to be ahead of the curve. They want the book to be slightly behind where reality is, and because it doesn't make anybody feel inadequate if they're not grasping the modern technology. There's a certain comfort to that.
Yeah, I think our characters, neither one of them quite get it, because you and I aren't exactly 25-year-olds. And so we are a little bewildered. It's not like you just can criticize it. There's a lot of good things about this stuff too. But more important, it's, my books are taking place today, right now, in the modern era. So you have to reflect that, like those old movies when the phone would ring, right? In the black and white movies, you see the phone ringing, and you see the person in, oh, please pick it up. Well, you can't do that anymore. Everyone's a cell phone. It'd be ridiculous to do that. Or if you're going on a date, you're Googling the guy's name. To not do that would be unrealistic. So that presents new challenges for us, but it also gives us new places for story.
Sure. It took away a lot of the easy tension. You're looking for a payphone. Do you remember that in all those old books and movies? You're looking for a payphone. It takes 5 minutes and you find one and the cord is cut or it's broken or something. Now
you couldn't reach anybody. Remember, it always be like you can't reach anybody. And now all those stories that we've had over the years where people didn't know who their father or mother was, that's going to go by the wayside too, where you would get that huge surprise in the end to find out that the father was really this one. You may be able to still do that, but you have to change it around to reflect the fact that people now, if they have doubts about who they are going to put their DNA in one of these sites, as
Sure.
Wild does.
Yeah. And but what's really cool about that is you get results back. They're anonymous at first, and you're depending on percentage possibilities, which can be ambiguous because 23%, apparently, according to your research, could be either a half sibling. Yep. Or in your parents' generation.
That surprised me a little bit. That's one of the lighter research that I did. That if you get a 50% match, you're figuring in your head, oh, that's definitely a parent. But first of all, you don't know if it's your mother or your father or your sibling. Because what percent? All of them different percentages. Your aunt, your uncles have the same percentage as a grandparent because it's 25%. So that part for me was sort of interesting. I always figured you signed up for it and they came back saying, oh, this is your brother. Not really. You just know the percentage of DNA you share. So it could be sliced several different ways.
Yeah, which then actually, as in the match, it sets up a certain amount of suspense. Actually, who is it? Right. And, that's the story that people are going to get hooked on. So before the event, Barnes & Noble sent me a whole bunch of questions sent in by your biggest fans amongst their customers. I'm going to ask the first one, which I think may be a genuine question, or it may be a subtle test of your social skills. Stacey Hensley wants to know, who are your favorite authors and books?
I got to be honest with you, I always hate getting this question, don't you? Because half the time I forget, so I'll list 5 and someone will go, well, what about so-and-so? I'm going to go, oh yeah, I actually like him more than at least 3 of those 5 that I just listed. So besides the obvious answer of Lee Child, That's pretty much it.
Yeah, I think you've passed Stacy's test, but I got to say, I love reading my good friends, because when you've written a book, you understand that, of course, it's a book, it's a story, it's completely made up, but it's also you that year. And so I read your book. It's like a letter from you about what was on your mind last year. Which I think is totally fascinating. On one level, it's a great story. On the other level, this is a friend telling me this was what was bothering me last year. And I really remember years and years ago, you and I had lunch with Dennis Lehane, and he was really distracted and would not talk about the book he was doing. And then a year or so later, Mystic River came out, which was a great Lehane book. Right. And I read that book and I thought, damn, that's why you were so distracted at lunch. That was on your mind.
I think he also smashed his laptop, he was telling us. Like he got angry about the book and he just took a punch at it and smashed that laptop. That's really an interesting way of putting it. I never really thought of that. But yeah, the colleagues of ours that are friends, it does feel like, okay, this is a chance to sort of spend time with them. And I'm wondering if that's also part of the joy for the readers as they get to know us, especially when we do our series characters, Reacher, or I'm doing Myron, now Wilde's a new series character, that it feels a little bit like you're spending time with a friend. That's sort of an interesting observation. I really thought of that.
Yeah, I think it definitely is. Not just series character, but the personality of the author shines through so strongly, I think, that it is. Stephen King, for instance, that you're Stephen King is telling you a story, and how cool is that? Yeah. It doesn't need to be a series book, but just the connection. Because reading is so intensely personal. You do it on your own. It's really the only entertainment that you do alone. Because television obviously is, you're probably watching with your family, or at least millions of other people are watching it simultaneously. Whereas reading feels so intimate that I think the connection is very strong.
It is, and there is something to, I think one of the things that an author has to have is voice. I can pretty much open up any page of one of your books, by one of my books, one of Conley's books, whoever we're talking about, and figure out who's writing that book fairly quickly in a matter of a couple of paragraphs. There's a certain voice. And it's one of the things that both of us have done TV recently, whatever strengths or weaknesses our shows may have. That's the one thing I don't think you can really kind of capture. And I've kind of given up on the idea that you're going to capture the voice in a certain production. You may enjoy it on a different sort of level, but that's what makes reading so great. That's what gives reading, creates empathy and that certain enjoyment that comes specifically from reading the book.
I agree with that. And voice is incredibly important. And a lot of people think of voice as some kind of airy-fairy literary notion, but I think of it literally as a voice. It's relatively recently, only like 100 or 200 years since regular people have read from a page. Before that, it literally was a voice. It was oral storytelling, possibly for 100,000 years. And so our response is somehow baked in to a voice telling us a story. And it is very important. It's unique. And yeah, television has... The camera is so antiseptic in a way. The camera just roams around, and there is not that personal author's brain kind of ruling the story. It is a lot more kind of disparate than that. Not that it doesn't work. I mean, and it reaches different audiences. I mean, I was talking to a person. Turns out she lives quite close to where you live, actually, in New Jersey, but she's absolutely not a reader, literally has never read a book, but she loved Stay Close on Netflix. And it was like a revelation to her. This is a great, great story. So we got to talk a little bit about the streaming thing, because you're heavily into it. And
you are too now. You are too.
Yes,
now.
I am. Reach has just aired, and it's done very well. And it is almost kind of different territory, the same but different.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is. I think people are always interested in the differences. And we both have dealt with this in different ways. And part of it is the struggle of how slavishly devoted to the text you are and how far away you can go from it. And I've learned in my case, I kind of don't worry about it. I just want the show to be what it is and good on its own. And if you tell me, I love the books, I don't like the series. I like the series, I don't like the books. Not really hurt either way. It's
Right.
you're not hurting my feelings when you say, "Wow, that adaptation wasn't as good as the book." That's not really hurting my feelings. I know you had the same thing by having Tom Cruise and Alan doing Reacher, one physically much closer. By the way, I thought Reacher looked a little bit like he almost looks like Michael C. Hall turning into the Hulk, but stopping about the midway point.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He's a really big, good-looking guy, but it's like he's like Michael C. Hall's turning into the Hulk, but they stopped him right before he turned green.
Yeah, exactly. Before the shirt buttons burst off. I thought, I completely agree with you. I thought they did a great job on Reacher, and I thought I loved it as a fan and as a consumer of TV. I thought it was terrific, and it was very faithful to the book in terms of spirit. But obviously, so many things have to be different. Especially the Reacher books are. People have especially bought them for movies and TV because they think, yeah, great, these popular book series, let's buy it. And then it's a question of be careful what you wish for, because so much happens inside Reacher's head. And how do you put that on the screen? And that's really the make or break. How do you get that stuff? And the same thing with you. I mean, in The Match, as I said, there's a lot of kind of narrator voice commentary that it adds a layer of charm and explanation to the book. And I'm thinking, suppose that was to be made visually, how would they do that?
No, it'll be the challenge that we'll have probably coming up at some point. But so that's why I don't want to say I've given up on it, because I haven't. But I just have found it's better to think of a TV series as a TV series. There's an old joke. Not joke, but giving credit to a lot of people. But the first one I heard, it was James Cain, who wrote A Postman Rings Twice and Double Indemnity, where they say, "Don't you hate what Hollywood's done to your books?" And he goes, "They've done nothing to my books. They're right there on the shelf." Yeah. And so the book is the book, and the TV series is the TV series. And as soon as I'm starting an adaptation, like when I did Stay Close, the first thing I'm already thinking of is, well, I don't want the people who read it already to know the ending. So how can I twist and add one more ending? Which we did in the last 2 minutes. That wasn't at all in the book. I want a different kind of story. You want to change the settings or whatever it is. If you come in slavishly devoted to having to keep with the text, I think you're going to be in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, you are. So here's another. This is a great question. It sounds more like it sounds like a story conference for a horror movie. This, in a nutshell.
Yeah.
This is from Shahab Bitan. He says, in a nutshell, what does a Harlan Coben brainstorm session look like when trying to think of a new book idea?
It's not pretty. But I think probably like there's a million different ones that come into my head and get dismissed before I finally come up with the one that's going to work. And there is nothing about this process is magic, but there is just a feeling that this one is staying with you. So the way the Match and The Boy from the Woods kind of came to me the same way. I was taking a hike through the woods of New Jersey. I know people are laughing, woods, New Jersey, but we actually have the Appalachian Mountains not far from where I live, the Ramapo Mountains. And I was taking a hike through with my kids, and I hate hikes. I don't get it. I see a tree, I see another tree, I see another tree. I'd rather walk around the city where I can window shop, or I can look at bookstores and browse through them, or coffee shops and look at faces. A tree, I get bored. And I'm getting bored and whining to my family. And on a parallel path, I see a boy probably around 5 or 6 years old. So I start thinking to myself, well, what if? What if this kid came out of the woods right now and said, I don't know how I got there. I've always lived in the woods. I don't remember any parents. I used to break into cabins or get fruit from trees, and I fended for myself all these years. I have no idea how. And now 35 years later, as the Match opens up, he is standing 20 yards away from his biological father, having found him on a DNA site and about to get all the answers to how he ended up being abandoned in the woods. So now in the first book, I didn't talk at all about his background in the woods, and people were like, well, why didn't you? Because it was another story. But so now it's like his origin story. If it was a comic book, this is where Batman's parents get killed story. So this is how you find out really how, but that's how the idea kind of came from to me, is that, and I don't know how that's how weird that is or not, but I have a million, and you probably, like, I ask what if kind of all the time, or suppose, and half the, 99% of the time, nothing happens with it. And then sometimes a few of them get together. The other thing I'll add to it is that's not a story. That's just the idea. And then, I'm thinking of all these things that I wanted to write about, as I mentioned before: online bullying, online trolling, reality TV stars, Instagram influencers. Well, how can I get them involved? Well, maybe one of the stars of those shows is somehow related to Wilde and goes missing. And now Wilde's got to get his answer through entering these worlds. And we, as we always do, we're making 10 minutes, in 5 minutes, I'm describing 3 months of work. And now I'm starting to be ready to write the book.
Yeah. It's the what if thing is so cool. I mean, it's just the best part of it. I wrote a book, I think my 5th book, called Echo Burning. I happened just to fall into a random conversation with a woman who was really happy and excited because her husband was getting out of prison the next day. And, automatically I started thinking, well, what if she wasn't excited? What if she was really scared about that? And then you just go down these rabbit holes. But you're right, it's never one idea. That is what, one of the questions we always dread is, where do you get your ideas? Well, ideas, like you just pointed out, you get 5 a day. Right. They bombard you from everywhere. First of all, you need more than one idea for a book. You need maybe 3 at least, if not 4. And then you got to find a way to combine them. I remember Michael Connelly once saying they're like atoms that you've got to combine into a molecule. And the molecule has got to be stable, so it doesn't just immediately degenerate. So you got to find the 4 ideas that you combine, and you've got to make sure that they're going to still be interesting next year when the book comes out, which is not always a given.
That's always I think that one of the harder parts too is being able to lay those tracks, and making sure that all of those things will somehow mesh. I think part of the joy for people who read both of us is you're on page 50 or 100 or 200 going, well, there's no way these stories are going to somehow come together. And, through hook or by crook, we somehow manage to do that. And I know you and I have spoken many times about our process, and I'm sure we'll do some here, but I always say that, right? If you ask 10 writers how they do it, you get 11 different answers. So you also have to we'll have things in common, but in the end of the day, you have to find your own path through all the, and another thing that shocked me in this book, which I didn't expect, is I'm on page, 40 or 50, and The Stranger pops up. Now, I wrote a book a number of years ago called The Stranger, and I did a TV series on Netflix called The Stranger, and in both, The Stranger gets away at the end. And I never really thought about what happened to The Stranger. It wasn't like I wanted to write a sequel. And as I'm doing this book, The Stranger just kind of I didn't mean magically, but I was like, who would be doing this particular task? And I was like, you know what? The Stranger had escaped and gotten away. This is exactly the kind of thing The Stranger would have done. So it wasn't for marketing or anything cute like that. It's just all of a sudden, this is also now a sequel to The Stranger.
Yeah, we got a couple of process questions, but also one about, did you intend, and I'm guessing not knowing you, but was this a plan that 2 years later, Wilde would feature again and so on? My guess is that in the back of your mind, you thought, I'll do that at some point, but there's no plan, right?
Well, there's no plan. I planned from the beginning when I wrote The Boy from the Woods, and somewhere along the way realized I'm not going to have space for his origin story here. And that kind of wouldn't be fair. And so I always knew I would write it. When I would write it, I don't know. Because I have Myron, I have Win now, I have Wilde, and I have a lot of standalones. I kind of come up with the idea first, and then I say, who's going to tell that story? So which character? So when I came up with the idea of a boy coming out of the woods, obviously Myron can't tell that story unless he's helping the boy. Win can't tell that story, so I created this new character, Wild. So until I know that, I never want to force it in my case. I don't want to do a Myron Bolitar book just because people want him back or because I have a balloon mortgage payment due or something like that. I want to do them for the right reasons, as weird as that sounds. So I don't know, like, will Wild come back? I think so. Will Myron come back? Yeah, I think so. And Win, I think they'll come back, but I don't know. The book I'm writing now has none of them. The one after the match is a standalone. But until I start writing it, until I get the idea, I don't know.
Well, that answers a bunch of questions we got here. When is Myron going to come back? When is Win going to come back? And
the other thing is, this too, it's so flattering. I mean, people think I would get upset about that. Of course I don't. I love the fact that you guys maybe want more Myron or more Win. I do too. But I don't want to force it. I realized a number of years ago, I'd written the first 7 Myron books I wrote in 5 years. And I realized I just could not, the way I was aging and changing him, could not keep up that pace for me as a writer and for him as a character. I didn't really want it to be one where, as much as Spencer's one of my favorite series of all time. So this is not a knock on Spencer, but when you fought in the Korean War and co-eds are still hitting on you when you visit college, you have to sort of take a look at what your age is, kind of a thing. So I didn't want to be, I always want to be personal. I didn't be wanting to, I was always worried about that. And that's kind of why I stopped writing him for a while and love to come back to him.
It's a real privilege, though, to have gotten into that situation where you can do that. And people talk about us as being veteran writers with these huge backlists now, but back in the day, with the previous generation of writers were so much more productive, and they did. I've done 25, 26 books, and people did that in a year in the old days because they had to. There wasn't the audience really for individual authors back then, other than I suppose a few superstars. Now there is. And one thing I wanted to know was the fan stuff in the match, the Instagram comments and the trolling and the horrible things that are said online about people. Do you get much of that? I think probably, yeah, we get a little bit of it, nothing like we might. How do you feel about that? How do you react to it?
Well, I think as writers, we do get, we have an interesting relationship with quote unquote celebrity and quote unquote fame. We're rarely recognized. We both know, you've seen Tom Cruise or whoever. We don't get anything like that. So for some people that's bad. For us, it's good. So we get, there's always someone's going to complain about your book or your TV series and think it's crap. I don't think that we get as much of it as a lot of other people in today's world, the political world. Of course, what really fascinates me is when someone wakes up and I'm always like, what happened to their life that they're going on, say an actress's website and talking about that she looks fat. I mean, what went wrong in their world? How unhappy are they? What's gone on? And I explore this a little bit with some of the characters that would make you take such a wrong turn in your life. And just like, were you proud of yourself when you were young? Did you imagine you would send out a tweet like this to someone you don't know? That's the stuff that really kind of fascinates me. And so if somebody does attack me, I take it from that perspective. It's like, how pathetic is this person's life that their joy is to try to make somebody else unhappy? I don't mind criticism. You and I have dealt with criticism our whole career, and I know neither one of us cares. I mean, we're human beings, we have feelings, but that's not what I mean. I mean the people that we all see online that are just so nasty and negative. And it's like, how does that make you feel better? What is wrong with you? What road did you take on the road of life that led you to this? And now that I point this out to you, do you realize it? Can you move back? That's what always interests me about this.
Yeah, and I'm not going to give it away, but there's a great example of that in the match where just exactly that. Why? I mean, what could possibly motivate what this person did? I think with writers, there's always a slight jealousy from wannabe writers. They're the ones that attack this sort of most viciously because they're thinking that, why isn't this happening to me? And there's probably good reasons for that. Not that, it is a bit of a lottery. It's you got to be lucky. So I completely understand that there are people of equal talent and ambition and hard work that are not making it. But I think they're not the ones complaining. It is other people.
Well, I've always known, the very successful literary writers are always ones who read us and have kind comments to say about us. It's never them. I went to college with David Foster Wallace, and I knew him for years. We read each other's works and stuff like that. It's always the failed ones. Yes. Sometimes when someone has a really mean comment, I do feel like saying, okay, so how many manuscripts are in your drawer right now? So, but I tell people that have that are wondering how they make that next step. I can tell you, feel good about, don't think you have to tear someone else down. One of the unwritten rules in crime fiction, where, as you can see from Lee and I, we get along, we're talking about other friends of ours, is no one has to fail so that I can succeed. That's just not the way. It's bad karma. It just doesn't work. The writers that I've always seen whine, I've never seen one make it. The one who are who instead of saying that, are like, how can I be there too? Not how do I criticize that guy for being there? I don't know I'm not a believer in karma, but there's something about that kind of personality that's going to work harder and be less negative and have a better chance of reaching that level.
Yeah, and that's, again, the great thing about being a reader, that there's a lot of us, and there's 52 weeks of the year to fill up. And so read us all, which is what people do. They have their favorites, they have a hierarchy, I guess, but there's room for everybody. And I personally, I love the new ones. I love new talent. I love to read a debut that is just great, because that the next 10 years are going to be a joy. You're going to read this person over and over again. That's
exactly right. And I also find that, if somebody loves a Lee Child book, they're now jonesing for more crime thrillers, and maybe they'll pick up a Harlan Coben book. So that is a boat that is going to rise and sink together. And I'm always looking for, we do, as they also say, send the elevator back down. It's not just out of kindness, though you should. It's just human nature that you actually should be nice and try to help the people behind you, just in anything in life. But the fact is, selfishly, right, I'm looking forward to reading some of these people. I'm looking forward to finding that next one that I can get jazzed and excited the way I hope that you guys feel jazzed and excited that the match is coming out today.
Yeah, I try and help new authors, and people think I'm a nice guy for it, but I'm not. I'm a completely selfish guy.
That's right.
I have never forgotten the thrill of finding a new author. Yeah. There's nothing better than that. I
still remember reading The Killing Floor when it first came out. I think one of the luck that I had was that Myron was not a hugely successful series, so they encouraged me to write standalone. So now I'd do both. But Reacher was a big hit. So if you wanted to not write Reacher, they would have been more upset with you. My publisher was like, if you're writing the eighth, if you're going like this, and you're in the seventh Myron book, there's no reason to think the eighth Myron book is going to sell like this. And so I did, and I wrote Tell No One, and sales did go like this. So in a sense, I was sort of lucky not to have the success from my series right away that you had.
The Tell No One, I remember that so well. That was one of the great moves of all time. To an extent, you'd cut your teeth, you knew what you were doing. And, correct me if I'm wrong, but I felt like this was Harlan Coben really coming home to where your heart truly was in Tell No One, because it set you off on this thing about the resonance of the past informing the present, which has been a constant, really, I think, in your best books, that somehow there's this yearning for what happened or what was unknown in the past or what has disappeared in the past. And I think, your books are super fast, hard-hitting reveals. It's said that Harlan Coben has never met a twist he does not love. And, that is
fair criticism.
But it is... it floats on this tide of warmth and emotion that comes from somehow something lost, which I think is unique with you.
Well, thanks. I do think, the ending of the match, it will be a surprise, but more important to me is that it has the emotional resonance that when Wilde gets the answer to why he was abandoned in the woods, that it's a little bit heartbreaking for you as a reader, in that you're not just surprised, but you actually feel something. I had written 2 standalone books before I wrote Myron, and my goal when I started Myron, besides making it a little bit more modern, in those days when I was starting out, they were loners, they were, Raymond Chandler's guy who walks down the mean streets alone. Myron went nowhere alone. He was a Jewish guy living in his parents' basement with, he was I wanted that. But more, I actually wanted to take what I thought I was good at, which was plotting, and put it into one of those kind of detective series. Because I think that those detective series had great characters, but not the best plots. And so in a sense, I went the other way then when I did the standalones, where I could take that kind of plot that we see in standalone novels, but have a lead character that you would be more empathetic and you would really kind of want to identify or hang with. So I'm trying both ways to combine those 2 things, where I think both have had moments of weaknesses if you're just doing one or the other. So that was kind of my goal. I sort of always knew that I was going to go back to standalones, but it just, and also I was mentioning before that I come up with an idea first. So I came up with this idea about a man who's happily married. His wife is murdered. 8 years later, he gets an email, he clicks a hyperlink, and he sees his dead wife walk by. And I'm like, wow, I just love this idea. But Myron doesn't have a wife who died 8 years ago, so he can't tell the story.
Yeah, somebody once said to me that a great ending has got to be both surprising and inevitable. Yeah. And I felt the match really hit that. It was, there's no way of knowing, you're not going to guess, but as soon as you know, you think, yeah, of course. That it was really good. So here's another question that we're sort of touching on: process. How long did it take you to finish the match? How long does it typically take you to finish writing a book? And by proxy, I know that it's a kind of chaotic process for you, that with a lot of not so much front loaded but end loaded. The marathon at the end, was that the same for the match?
It is. It was. So each book takes about 9 months. Now they're taking a little bit longer, just because with the TV stuff that I've been working on. So I do 1 book a year, and if it takes me 9 months, and Lee's heard this all before, so I'm boring him, but if it takes me 9 months and it's 500 pages long, at the 8-month mark, I'll maybe be on page 200, 250, and I'll write at least half of it in the last month. The last 40 pages of the match I wrote in 1 day, and it always happens. It's not like uncommon. It's not a pretty day. You don't want to hang around me that day. My kids are like, throw daddy a banana and run on that day, and I grow a playoff beard. It's a whole thing. But I start to see that ending, and nothing can stop me. I let nothing get in the way of just barreling toward the end. So that's been my way for a lot of years. Every time I feel like that's not going to work, I assume that's the same thing with you, Lee. I'm kind of curious about that. It's one thing we've talked about. Every time I think, oh, it's not going to work this time. I've kind of lost it. I don't think I'm going to be able to make it. With experience, you learn that voice is wrong. But in my case, that voice is always still there. Do you get that kind of thing going?
Yeah, absolutely. And I got it pretty early. The first book was a success, and then really every subsequent book, I thought, oh, that was a fluke. I can never repeat this. I've been found out now. I'm washed up. I'm finished. And for a long time, I thought it was just me. But then you very nervously confide that in somebody, and you find out, no, it's all of us. And in fact, it has to be. The person who is not feeling that is going to fail. You cannot get smug or complacent about it, or you can sort of rely on the fact, well, I've done it before, so maybe it'll work. But if you feel confident about a book, I think it's going to be a bad book. There's something, you're hanging over an abyss all the time. And I think the fear of it makes the book better. Yeah.
Only bad writers think they're good. That's what I always say. And even a couple books ago, sounds like I'm name dropping or bragging, and maybe I am a little bit here, but when Stephen King wrote The Outsider, he had me as a character, somebody going to one of my book signings, and he actually asked my permission. Like, I was going to say, no, Steve, please don't use my name in a book. But he sent it to me, and I could tell he was like nervous about my reaction. He was like making excuses for it. It was still wrong. I'm like, you're Stephen King, so you still have this, right? This is never gonna end for me. I've written 34 books, you've written 25, 30 books, we sold a couple 100 million between us. That's not gonna go away, is it? And it's not. If Stephen King is still feeling it, who are we not to be feeling that?
I know it's never going to go away. And the second disappointment for me is I assumed it would become easier to do. And it never does. And again, somebody very wittily or cleverly said, you never learn how to write a novel. If you're lucky, you learn how to write the one you're writing then. And then you start over the next year.
Yeah. I look at it almost sometimes like it's a field of high grass. And the first time you're just slicing through it. You can go anywhere you want, and eventually you'll get to the end, but you have no idea how long it's going to take. You don't know if we get to the end. And then a second time you go through, you can't go that exact same way. So you know a little bit more, but you can't use what you've already used. And you just keep going back to that front. Hopefully, eventually some of that grass will grow back as I really stretch this metaphor into something unrecognizable. But it doesn't. It really, no one believes that. They think it becomes a formula. You kind of get it. It really never gets easier. And I think you're still at the same stage I am. I still want every book to be better than one before it. I don't know if it is, but I still in my heart I want The Match to be the best book of mine you've ever read. I want you to come back to me and say, you know what? Tell No One sucked in comparison to The Match. And so when someone says to me, the new book was good, but I love the one you wrote 6 years ago, I'm a little disappointed. It's a very weird phenomenon.
Well, what I want is for them to get no worse, because I think that is, there's a bargain with the reader. The reader does you a huge, enormous compliment of reading the book. And, I'm not that worried about the money they spend on it because books are disgracefully cheap. But the thing that they spend on it is 2-3 days of their lives that they will never get back. And so I feel a huge responsibility not to let them down, to let them be no worse than the last one, do my absolute best. And, that's all we can do about it, really. But
that's key. That's really key. I think that you both know, we both know you walked into a bookstore, there's thousands of books, and truly what an honor that you chose one of ours. Out of those thousands of books, and if I let you down, I know saying, I'll feel bad about myself. That's letting you down. I've let you down. So
plus I think that we have a sort of collective responsibility, and especially people like you and me, the genre that we're in, with the kind of audiences that we have. On the margins of that audience are people that are kind of reluctant readers, not habitual readers. And if you disappoint them, they might stop reading altogether. There's so much competition now and so many other good things to do with your leisure time that if, like a really literary reader, I think doesn't expect to enjoy the book all that much. Maybe 85% is their maximum. And if they don't like it, they just put it aside and start the next one. But with some people, it's a real risk that will turn them off altogether.
Now, that's a lot of responsibility. But it's an interesting point. Another interesting point that you're making there is, writers 100 years ago or 200 years ago or whatever had to compete with pretty much nothing. There were other books. We have, how many times you're going on this thing. And you're on an airplane now. I never see people with books. I always see them with this thing, social media, Netflix, TV, DVD, whatever it is. We have so many video games. We have so many things that we have to compete with. And I was thinking when I was, The Killing Floor was about the new Reacher TV series on Amazon Prime is with. And I remember that first scene still to this day when you first read it. You don't wait. He's just sitting in that diner and things are about to get really hairy in a matter of seconds. And I was thinking the same thing with The Match. I'm not going to have him get off the plane and wait. The book opens, he's actually looking at his biological father. Not because we have to necessarily be forced speed, but you really have to be concentrating on the fact that every word has to count. Every page, every sentence, every description has to carry some sort of weight to it.
Absolutely. And we can't ignore the fact that we are not necessarily competing with other media, but we are all swimming in the same river, and everybody influences everybody else. And that the Charles Dickens thing where you introduce a character, and 37 pages later, you're probably still talking about their great grandparents or something. We have to do that differently. You're absolutely right. I mean, the way that the match opens is you're right into it immediately, and there is no possibility of stopping at that point. But if you had that whole throat clearing thing where they get up in the morning, they describe the weather, they go to the airport ready to make that trip, then you're lost. That's just, we got to understand that is so out of date now. We can't get away with that.
And you just dropped Reacher right in the middle of the situation. It's one of the keys is you start the scene sort of in the middle. You always just, you're dropping Reacher right into whatever situation he's, you may be in some books you're introducing the bad guys first or whatever, but you're right away. It just has to be. It's not right. I mean, it just has to be.
Yeah, it does. So I think we are supposed to wrap it up about now. And I'm supposed to say that for everybody who's joined us, you get a signed copy of The Match, which is, again, fabulous book. I did read it. I'm so glad that I read it. I mean, I'm kidding. I always read Harlan. He always sends me an advance copy. So obviously I'm going to read it. But it is, The Match is, Tell No One sucks in comparison to The Match. It really does. It's so good. It has great action, perfect ending, and it kind of really sets up the next Wild. So as well as the next Win, the next Myron, we got a whole bunch of people waiting for the next Wild. So if you're joining us tonight, your ticket includes a signed book. You'll get that through the mail in, I believe, 6 to 8 days, they said. So look forward to it, enjoy it. And Harlan, great to see you. And
always
thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much, Lee, as always. And obviously, all of you already read Reacher, but if you don't, read Reacher. And then watch it now on Amazon Prime. And then you can tell us which is better or worse. That's how it all works.
Yeah, it's always up to the viewer and the reader. It's nothing to do with us.
Thanks very much. Take care, everybody.
Bye.